Well, good morning. Good morning, early birds. We are going to have our eyes opened by Jeff Clemons, and I'm not sure how much he's going to use fear and paranoia in his talk, but that's always a good motivator. Jeff is Director of Risk and Cyber Advisory Services for Frost CPAs and is the CISA, helping organizations and individuals with their financial, operational, informational technology and compliance needs. So welcome, Jeff. I think we're looking forward to your presentation.
Sure. I mean, it shouldn't be that bad or anything like that. I mean, it's mostly just repeating stuff that you probably heard on the nightly news and then sort of going over everything. So I'm going to set a timer because I tend to ramble and everything. So yeah, so today we're going to go over cybersecurity practices. Just know, cybersecurity and IT, they sound like the same thing, but we're going to be mostly focusing on sort of, what some of the threats are out there towards people in your position, the people that work for you work for, everything. We're just going to go over what's going on at a high level, give some general feedback, and go from there. So, real quick, I'll do a quick introduction of myself, my firm, and then an overall sort of introduction to the thing. I'll go do a quick summary state of what I'm seeing a lot at agricultural entities in terms of their IT functions. Sort of, what's out there, where we're at. Then I'm going to go into, like I said, the cold hard truth, stuff you're seeing on the news. After that, we'll go into best practices, and we'll wrap this up with some questions. All right. So just to start off, I'm Jeff Clemons. I'm a CISA. That's a Certified Information Systems Auditor. I've been doing it for over 13 years. Been working with Frost for a good portion of that, working with family-owned, enterprise-level agricultural companies all over the world. I've been to Russia, did some of this stuff. Potatoes were pretty good, that was about it.
So Russia knows a few things about cybersecurity. Huh?
Yeah, you should have seen the stuff I left on my computer when they confiscated it. But yeah, so been doing this for a while. I was supposed to be a third generation North Alabama farmer, but I was a little too lazy according to my father, and so I became an accountant. We grew up on a farm where we did row crops, chickens, hogs, cattle, and we rode the wave of any market or any producer like that. But I'm very thankful that's what put me here today in front of y'all. Frost, we're a national, regional public accounting firm. We have offices in North Carolina, Arkansas, Arizona, Florida. Didn't miss any, did I? Well, I'm special. I'm special, and I'm based out of Atlanta. And again, we're considered some of the leaders in agriculture, auditing, and accounting and tax services. Better than those last guys. And I'm just kidding. I didn't know if he could hear me there or not. But no, we love the industry we work in, and we're really good at it. About today. While we're going through there, I prefer for interaction. If not, I'll just sit up here and pace, sort of shift my weight back and forth, take my hands in and out of my pockets. It's just how I am. And the more nervous I am, the more nervous y'all going to be, and then y'all just going to be scared. But just, interact. If you got questions, pop out. I'm more than happy to answer it. And I also want to sort of give a disclaimer that some of the stuff that I'm going over today, this is not a one-size-fits-all thing. These are best practices. If you got specific needs and requirements, you really need to approach somebody else and talk one-on-one and go over it. There's specialists out here who can really help you reduce risk, sort of make it easier to sleep at night and all. But I just want to make that disclaimer. I don't want you to run out and say we have to do this. That's not what I'm saying. This is just some best practices. All right. All right. So overall, working across our member base and just in the general SMB, medium-sized, enterprise-level businesses, IT spending is going up, but at the same time, in the agricultural industry, we're seeing a lot of it still being performed mainly in-house. That's a big sort of staunch thing. There's only a few industries that are like that, where there's really holding on to the in-house, which is nothing wrong with it, but it's just the demands of a local, hands-on, boots on the ground requirement for most producers. They have to have somebody there that can fix the owner's cell phone, fix their DVD player, but at the same time, address individual users at the location, really help that, and it's a lot easier just to have them there because of the remoteness and whatnot from there. Many times, the staff is pretty small. They're a typical ratio for most 50 employees and lower is about 1 to 18. One IT person for every 18 headcount. We're nowhere near that in the ag industry. I mean, you're lucky to have 1 or 2 ag IT people at a location or at a company altogether. And those guys are having to wear many hats. They're having to handle network issues. They're having to handle hardware, application support. And again, the requirements from the owners, the higher ups that really run the gamut. I mean, I've heard of IT people having to go out and set up DVD players, security systems at personal houses. That's just sort of what it's done. iPhones and iPads, I guarantee you most IT people hate them because they've had to set them up for nearly everybody at the upper management at that company. They do. It's just how it is. Even though IT spending's gone up, in the agricultural industry, budgeting is really based on the market. I mean, how everything's doing. Just because there's risk out there doesn't mean all of a sudden you're going to get more money to spend. I mean, IT risks are at the highest level they've ever been, but at the same time, that does not mean that the spending can support the steps you need to take to mitigate risk. So overall, budgets and capital tightening is just we saw a nice little bump probably in the late or mid 2000s around some of the compliance stuff, especially at my enterprise clients. But really, we're starting to see a lot more capital tightening and shrinking of budgets and really focusing on special projects and stuff like that where some of the money can go. Some of the big struggles, obviously, communication, connectivity, multiple locations across rural areas. It's just an issue. I think FBS has a big issue with that right now too. I mean, anytime you got somebody on your system, you get bumped out of their session, they're sort of screwed up for a while, and there's really nothing you can do until the infrastructure is there to support it. Mobile connectivity is not where it's at, where it needs to be able to support what the IT functions and what the business functions of most companies are. So they're having to deal with that. But at the same time, it makes the requirements on their hardware and their IT spending sort of decrease, because if you can't support it with connectivity, why are you buying some of the best stuff out there? So you're able to be a few generations behind, especially on some hardware and stuff like that, which it poses its own security risk in itself. And then, as usual, staffing constraints. They like to have boots on the ground. They like to have it in-house. Most agricultural companies like to have the IT professionals there, but it's hard to find quality IT people that would either move to where the agricultural company is located, where he's needed, and or to develop it. It really is. I mean, it's something that I've had conversations with many people where it's just they're having to look at outsourced arrangements just for training or sort of co-managed help to get through. Any questions on this?
That's the first time that's come up.
What has?
Training.
Training? And training is important. I mean, you got two guys that work with me that really wish they'd train me more all the time. But I mean, training at the IT level, at the local university, at like the community college level, it's not where it was. I mean, you had those for-profit universities that were putting out sort of IT specialist degrees and whatnot. But what was happening was they were getting loaded up in debt and they couldn't afford to move out where they were needed because of it was just so expensive that degree ended up being. And we really saw that even if they could get somebody that were only there for 1 or 2 years and then they were moving to a bigger city where the pay was better.
It would be helpful to know things that cannot be handled remotely. Here's the issues that you have to have somebody on site sometime or things.
Boots on the ground is always necessary. I mean, it's amazing for stationary objects. Cables can come undone all the time. You'll have a rack of communication software or hardware, and all of a sudden it won't be working because somebody tripped over something. They were in there messing around when they shouldn't have been, and stuff like that. And so having somebody on site really, allows there to be a less of an interruption for something like that happens. There's a comfort. There really is. I mean, if you're sitting there at 1 o'clock in the morning trying to get something out to the bank, and all of a sudden you can't get something to print, it's better to have somebody call than try to sit there and figure it out yourself.
They'll tell you to reboot.
Well, that's my extent. But yeah, I mean, it really is important to. You can't sort of put a value on having somebody out there. A lot of times, it's much more than what they're actually getting paid. Anything else? All right, some cold hard truths, and these. I'm moving around on that one, but these are some of the big numbers that show up a lot of times on the news. I've said that a few times now, but overall, what we're seeing the most of in the industry or in the world is we're seeing ransomware, we're seeing phishing, and we're seeing internet-based breaches or attacks, denial of service, stuff like that. Affecting small, medium-sized businesses, enterprise level businesses. It really doesn't matter. It's they don't really care how big or small you are anymore. You're a target. And so I think it was in 2018 these numbers were $22.7 billion in financial losses, and that the overall economy, the money that's changing hands and that's going from one hand to another, it's a very lucrative business at 1.5 trillion. Mostly it's only countries that can have that kind of turnover and stuff like that, and spending and economy growth over year, and it really is a global economy when it comes to it. It doesn't matter where you're at. If there's an internet connection, they can see it. I mean, and when I go through this, I'm going to throw some more numbers at you. When you're going through all of this, there is a very real possibility it's going to happen to you, either at the personal level, or at the company level, or at the family level. I mean, it's really sort of unavoidable. And later on, I call my best practices wear your seatbelts and brush your teeth twice daily. Because I say that because you can buckle your seatbelt, you can brush your teeth twice daily, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be in a wreck, and it doesn't mean you're not going to have a cavity one day. You can do everything you can, but it just doesn't give you 100% certainty that it's going to prevent it. So Some more sort of stats. These first two slides on this side of it are very general. The next few are my exciting ones. 43% of business were a victim of a cybersecurity breach. That's sort of a misleading because a lot of companies get hit multiple times. But if you just take the number of companies out there that report this and the number of pure breaches that happen, we're sitting at 43% of them of attacks, and those are the ones that are known. I mean, it's sort of like a tip of an iceberg. From that, 30% of them are from phishing emails. I told you I was going to talk about phishing. I'm a big fisherman, but not like this. I'm getting to the point where they call them phishing emails and everything like that, but they're getting closer and closer to being called catching emails. They really are. I mean, they're becoming very effective, very hard to tell, and they're a lot of times working their way around. They're not using the attachment from somebody. We're starting to see fileless malware attacks that have come from phishing emails, where we're just opening the email will actually start it up. So if it's not getting caught in a quarantine folder and you just open it up, it looks like a legitimate email from somebody. Just open it. No, because a lot of times there's always been there's stuff hidden in the header. They'll embed some code in the header that's very hard to read, and I mean it's to the point where I mean most of these guys are having to spend considerable sums. The people that maintain these quarantine and services, email scanning services, where I mean it's very, very hard. It's to the point where you're really wondering, are we going to have an alternative to email eventually? Which I know personally that would make it, my wife would be a lot happier, but at the same time, it really has a huge impact on overall communication culture of the company. So, 30% of them are open, and a pretty good bit of those are actually, and then FBI, they're receiving 900 complaints a day. I will put another caveat in there that includes, bullying, internet bullying, all that other stuff, but cyber stalking and whatnot. But what's interesting is that FBI is really having to allocate a lot of resources to do that. It's mostly treated as a domestic issue, even though a lot of it occurs or originates outside of the United States. Any questions? All right.
So of the 43% of businesses that are affected, is the phishing the largest cause?
No. I mean, a lot of it is related to settlements related to. Wait, when you say 43%, are you talking about the cost, or are you talking about is that 43% from phishing?
Yeah, I'm asking. So it says 43% of businesses are victims of cybersecurity.
Oh, so you're asking how much of that is from phishing?
Of those victims, what is the biggest?
It's mostly phishing. A lot of it's still pure Trojan viruses, where you click on a link, all 500 Internet Explorer things pop up, and that's still the most common because it's the easiest. I mean, phishing is interesting because it usually takes some type of human interaction to initiate it. A lot of the bots and the worms that are out there, they've been swimming around there for a long time. They're really living their own life, living the dream, messing people up, and really they're autonomous. But a lot more of these phishing attacks, they're originating from somebody and then doing the same thing, but it's really having to do that. So it's mostly, from my understanding, mostly still viruses, Trojans, worms, stuff like that. right. All right. So here's some stuff that came out last week. Some of it, and this was what I really thought was interesting, especially with the crowd that I'm talking to and all, because I know a lot of y'all, you're running small local networks where you might have a connection, remote connection into a feed mill or a remote location or anything like that. But what we're going to sort of look at is the different types of ransomware right now and sort of what's going on. So just between April 2019 and June 2019, there were 550,000 forensic inspections for cyber attacks. I mean, that's a great business to be in if you're doing those forensic inspections. So that means that they're just sitting out there waiting on the business. They're really not even sitting out there. They're stacked up. So 550,000 forensic inspections. Out of those inspections, 22% of them were ransomware that bypassed security. That means that this was ransomware that encrypted files, that avoided mail filters, it avoided firewalls, it avoided detection software, very high grade detection software, and actual cybersecurity initiatives. So 22% of small and medium-sized businesses under 50 people were attacked by this security, by something that bypassed security. Out of those same inspections, 72% of them they identified riskware, which is stuff that poses a risk. It hasn't done anything else yet, but it's something that shouldn't be out there. It's whether it's a file sharing application. If your company doesn't allow Dropbox to use, if your company is using has a standardized method of communication like a Skype or something like that, and somebody's using a third party for them to talk to their friends elsewhere that's not approved. But it's also including stuff that may be running any type of monitoring software, videotape software, video conferencing software. So, but anyway, riskware and unwanted applications that took over 90 days. So imagine you've got this one guy sitting out at some of these locations, and it's taken them 90 days just to remove stuff that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. Yeah.
You talked about the 22% that got attacked by ransomware, by ransomware.
Correct. Where
Not only did it get through everything, but ransomware is it almost always it requires human interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an extortion.
It got through all that and
Well, yeah.
in doing something, they had to initiate something that brought that on.
Correct. A lot of times
Through
it's
all that, but then human piece, maybe that's
well, and there's some of it where again, clicking on an email. It used to be where the ransomware was done, and the next slide will go into some more of this, but it can be initiated by clicking on an email. And that's because of what I'm coming up on next. Okay, so there's a thing called dwell time in cybersecurity lingo, and that means that's considered the time where a malicious software or bug, virus, whatever, entered into the network. And the dwell time is between entrance and discovery. How long this piece of malicious software sat there. So ransomware, this has gone up a good bit recently. It was a few years ago, it was something like 20-something days. because typically it was an email. It was a pretty quick ransomware demand after it because somebody's just sitting there waiting on you to click on it. Well, what's happening now is the ransomware, the software that's actually going to encrypt the files or whatever's going to enact the function that makes you pay will sit there. And it'll wait for an email to be sent. Somebody clicks on that email, it initiates the program. So they're getting to the point where they're basically just the parties that are doing this, they're basically just seeding the place, and then they're waiting to go pick it. They really are. Persistent malware. Well, that means that it's continuously going through, looking at stuff, it's persistently working. It's not waiting on that initiation. That dwell time is averaging over 700 days. It has gone in there 2 years ago. It's just sitting there biding its time, waiting on it to make its move. And it will have an algorithm built into it to tell it when to initiate. And a lot of times it's built to outside of business hours, something where it would be able to cause the most impact and really scare people the most. Just imagine you're sitting there the week before Christmas, you're about to go on vacation. An owner is a lot more likely to pay something when there's that type of pressure. In a month. I mean, they can use a lot of different methodologies to really work their way into extracting that money from you.
So I've always assumed that if you're making backups and this happens, you say, well, we'll just roll back to yesterday or something like that. But the possibility that this has retroactive effects of what damages
but you're making an assumption that people are doing quality backups and they're doing backups correctly. I call that availability, the availability of data backups. But there's an assumption there. And there was something not too long ago where I read it's like 1 in 10 backups are actually not being checked to ensure that they're recoverable.
But if you could roll back, and it isn't like this persistence has done damage without rearing its ugly head. Yeah.
Right. But you're also assuming that you've got staff on site that have the expertise and knowledge on being able to restore a system. Yeah. You've also got to evaluate the time that takes. Is it going to be something that's quick?
What I hear in the normal question is, I've made really good backup. So I get an attack. And my first reaction is, I'm going to wipe everything and start over and bring my backup stuff. But if you've got this welding stuff out there,
it's sitting in your
you
backups.
may be there just waiting to get you triggered.
Yeah, it's sitting in your backups.
So you may not get rid of it.
Well, a lot of times, the reason why a lot of these dates are these day ranges are so big is because people aren't patching. They're not patching. Windows releases Patch Tuesday. You know how many people ignore that? It's insane. Antivirus being up to date. I mean, trust me, I had that Morton antivirus on the first laptop I had, and it drove me crazy. But, I mean, there's some value to it. But yeah, I mean, backups should always be what your plan is. That's the good strategy. But through my experience, I've become way too skeptical, and I just don't trust people doing it right.
Well, let me just see this. These are putting a lot of pressure. Putting a lot of pressure.
I mean, you've got to have some type of accountability with your IT department. I mean, and I'm not saying from the accounting department, because y'all are each other's pain. Y'all really are. But y'all are always asking stuff that's distracting him from making the guy who signs his paycheck happy. I mean, that really is. I mean, and a lot of times these IT guys are really touchy. You question if the backups are being done right, they're going to be like, oh yeah, it's the best ever. And because they know at the same time, you got no way of knowing. How are you going to go in there? I mean, you're trusting them. And I'm not saying that that's a malicious thing. They just might not have the expertise or the know-how to know that they are really not doing it correct. I mean, it's just where it is. I mean, you've got guys that, I mean, you saw in my previous slide, they're wearing multiple hats. Multiple hats. And so it's really scary. And then the final one, riskware, that's again the unapproved applications, stuff like that that's sitting out there that takes 90 days for an IT guy to remove usually. They usually have a dwell time of 869 days. So what's actually happening is you've got this piece of software that people think is pretty innocent. They've knowingly downloaded it, uploaded it. There wasn't any type of policy where they couldn't install it on the computer. They had admin rights on their local desktop, stuff like that. They did it, and it sat there for nearly 3 years now, 2.5 years. Just wait. Then all of a sudden it turned bad. Scorned girlfriend.
Many of us have more than one email account, correct?
So, oh yeah.
Personal or whatever. How many of those get attached to each other, and so that you don't have a secure email address for your company? How much
So-
is that where?
So you're talking like you get hit in one email address and it just sort of spreads like a virus?
Yeah, they're aiming towards your business, but then they've got all your personal things too about you.
I mean, a lot of times it does that because a lot of times the focus, especially on like they've got different types of phishing. So spear phishing, they're directly sending it to somebody that they know that has certain rights. And one of the things that they know of is if they've got this right, they've got a great contacts list. Because a lot of times there's the ability to get into the network, but there's also all they're getting is a new client list. Basically, every time they hit one of these guys, and they're just sitting there and they're like, ah. So if you've ever sent yourself an email, I mean, I'll do it. I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, and so so you're very much at risk between first.
Is there any way to go offline with all your emails?
Stamps.
Quit.
I mean, there's enterprise grade software out there. I mean, there's some really great stuff, but I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I mean, it's really, and I'll get into this later. It's end user training, is what it is. The best sort of way you can prevent something like that is to make people feel comfortable knowing to come and ask a question if they see something weird. You know, knowing not to click on that email if it's not from somebody that they recognize.
A lot of people don't do that.
Right.
That's
Right. I mean that is.
well,
And a lot of time, and the other side of that is a lot of times people, once it happens, people are so afraid to tell somebody because they're afraid they're going to get fired. Yeah.
So most of these, it seems like these geeks who send these out cannot spell. So it's pretty easy to see that doesn't look reasonable. But occasionally we get these. It looks 360 Office 365 is in the right colors and things like that. Email, and when I get something like that, I forward it to our head of development. And you're saying just the fact that you've been opened it, that maybe the damage has been done.
Yeah.
So
That could be the trigger.
Yeah. So what do you do? You know,
Go to the backup.
yeah. What? But to avoid that, some of these getting a little better, a little more. But
I mean, we're starting to see email, especially phishing emails, that it'll spoof actual email addresses of individuals in your thing. So a lot of times you could go in there, sort of hover over the from, and you'd see like TJ Bull, but it would have an email address of something at yahoo.com.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I've seen them where it'll say TJ Bull and it'll say TJ Bull or T Bull at frostplc.com. So how are you going to do it? And
Well, you're
trust
supposed
me,
to tell
accountants
us.
are terrible spellers, so you're not going to be able to tell the difference.
That's stereotypical.
He called us geeks just a second ago. I feel justified. All right, so here's the best practices. So I'm going to go through these pretty quick. Here's some stuff. And I'm going to start out with telling you this is all stuff that you can do yourself. Some of you you might need to contact somebody else, but especially these first three things that I'm going to go over, it's stuff you can do yourself. I don't ever want to come in here and tell you guys to spend a lot of money. I mean, if I'm going to tell you to spend money, I want you to spend it on me. But there's some stuff you can do. So the first thing I'm going to go over is IT self-assessment. And some of y'all may do this, and you've got people that do it, but I encourage anybody that's doing it. You can do it at the company level, and you can also do it at the individual level. I want you to sit down and write down all the hardware you use. Mice, USB drives, monitors, everything. Hardware, when they talk about the Internet of Things now, and the connectivity of everything, your hardware is about to be as vulnerable as anything else. Bluetooth speakers, I mean, it's absolutely frightening. Some of the attacks that we're going to see in the next few years from connected devices. So hardware, you got to start making a hardware inventory. Maintain it. Again, at the individual level and at the company level. You need to do a software inventory. And be truthful. I mean, you can put Microsoft Solitaire on there. You should. You need to know what's sitting out there on your computer and at the company level, what's sitting out there for everybody.
Are there ways of automating that?
There's software that'll actually pull an inventory on there. There's some freeware ones that you're always, anytime, I mean, there's some great open source tools to do a lot of this stuff, but the concern is anytime you're using open source, there's somebody that could have done something malicious in it. I mean, it's use it on risk. You can, I mean, if you've got an IT guy that's, you can set some of this stuff in a sandbox to sort of test it out first, sort of really get the feel of it. But yeah, you can. There's stuff there. But you have to do everything. You can't be like, that doesn't really matter. You got to do everything.
So what is that? So you do hardware.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do?
Why
are you do it?
I'm going to get there. Yeah. I mean, because it doesn't matter until you write it down. It's not a goal until you've written it down, right? You've heard that before. You got to write it down. So you got to have the inventory, hardware, software, and then you got to look at your data and you got to identify it. And when I'm saying data identification, I want you to know where it is. And this is your data. It could be on your computer. It could be data that you're responsible for at your business function. So somebody works in FBS. Even though that person's sitting there, those person should be able to identify that this is the data that they're responsible for. Where is it? Is it in the cloud? Is it on my local? Is it on the server? Where is it? Where did that data come from? Was it from an application? Is it calculated through an application? Is it something that's downloaded? Is it something that I maintain? Where is it? Where's it coming from? And then, what's the availability of it? Is this being backed up? How long back? How far back does the backups go? And a lot of times, your end users are going to have no idea. They're going to rely on it. But guess what? If you have them do it, they're going to start asking people. And you get that IT person answering the same question far enough, all of a sudden that guy's going to send out an email. He's going to say, "Hey, everybody," and all of a sudden they've written a policy for you. And you're starting something. So, hardware inventory, software inventory, and data identification / inventory. And you take all of that and you go, okay, what's the business impact of this, of all this stuff? Is this what I need to do my job? Is this what so-and-so needs to do their job? And then you really make the decision. So that's what I'm getting at on this, is you just assess yourself. Is this necessary? We're going to get minimalist here. If it's not necessary, get rid of it. If it's not adding value to your business, to the well-being of your employees, sometimes you have applications like that.
What are some examples that you see that, like you said, now, for 50% of people?
Yeah, well,
What are some things that you might
I
have
see.
seen that you say, we're seeing this, we don't need this?
So I'm starting to see like Bluetooth speakers attached to, connected to laptops. So there's a even though it's wirelessly, there's a point-to-point communication.
Whereas they could just be using
Headphones.
records.
I mean, they could be using they could be using Bluetooth headphones.
Well, even Howard and I say,
Yeah, I mean, my dad actually asked me the same thing. He Deb his door now. He hadn't been wearing it recently because he was like, I'm scared of the Russians. But yeah, I use the word business impact. This is really just a spring cleaning. Do you really need it? And sometimes you might not know if there's any risk to having that this mouse or something like that. But really look at it and be like, does everybody need it? And really from there you can go to something here in a little bit that I'll touch on, and that is sort of a oh man, I have been going really over. Then we'll go over sort of how to roll this into some policies at the end user level. All right, data classification is something. So we talked about data identification in the previous one. This is at the company level. I think everybody should have data classification policy or methodology. What you need to do is you need to assess each type of data that you've identified, and you need to identify it as a different class. I always like to use confidential, which means something you don't want anybody to say. Sensitive, which is stuff that may be shared at an industry level or something like that, or in email, something like that. Something that wouldn't stop your business if it got out, but it's it's there. And then public stuff you don't care about, stuff on your website, stuff like that. And then you go through there, and each type of those data, that data that you did, you go through there and you evaluate the business impact. So this is different from the minimization that I talked about previously. This is going through and saying, okay, this data, what's its impact on operations? If it went away tomorrow, or if I couldn't access it for 24 hours, what's its impact? Is it going to stop it? Is it going to slow me down? Is it going to ruin me? Financial, same thing. I like you to put in that regulatory one. You got payroll records. You got employee information sitting out there. Guess what? All of a sudden, that FBI guy that's looking at you, if you've been breached, all of a sudden, this is something where there may be some type of payout that has to take place, because all of a sudden, there's all your employees are subject to identification stealing and stuff like that. There's just fines on it, especially if it's sitting out there unencrypted. And so you go through each data class, and you sit down there, and you're like, okay. You look at the top that you've done, so you know how often it's being backed up, where it's sitting, what it's being used for, what's the source of it. And you look at how you classified each one of those, and you go, are you okay with this? Does this make you scared? Are you okay with it? And if you're scared, you got to do something about it. You got to change your methodologies. You got to change your habits. You either cut it out, or you have to put the safeguards in place. And again, they're just safeguards. They're not preventions. But you got to take the steps to mitigate that fear you got. The next thing is the words on a piece of paper. That's just what a lot of people say. They get so tired of hearing implementation of policies. They think that they're just having to write all this stuff down. No. This is as important as a core value. You're telling people this is what they have to do. Tell them that. You have to tell them. I got 15 minutes. If they're over there downloading stuff without regard, if they're doing stuff on the internet, if they really don't have any type of saying you can't do this, you're at risk. Write it down. I guarantee that most people are going to mind it because, hey, if it's written down, that usually means that it's a punishable thing internally. But if it's not, and this is just something that's going on, they're not going to talk. They're not going to communicate with you when it happens. They're not going to know that they did anything wrong, and it just sort of covers up everything. So you need to implement end user focused on. Everybody has the same type of hardware. Everybody uses the same type of software. This is what happens when this does happen. You got to start planning for it. What do you do? Does anybody know what they would do if they got hit by ransomware right now? I want everybody to pick up my card. Nah. You got to know that. Or you got to know where to look. I mean, and this isn't geared just towards the upper guys. This is y'all's responsibility. You also have to strategize. So when this happens, what do we do to minimize the reputational impact, our business impact going forward? What's our strategy for trying to prevent this? What's our strategy for getting out of this? You plan for the disruption, and then you have to strategize for what happens afterwards. It's really got to be there. And then one of the other things I always just throw in there, you gotta consider internet restrictions. It upsets a lot of people, mainly the IT guys, because they're the ones that are sitting there going to stuff they're not supposed to. But usually they're the ones that have opened up the white lists and everything like that on the firewalls to get there. But they really there needs to be a little bit more harsh policies on any internet connected device where they can go, what they can download, stuff like that. End user security training. This is the cheapest, outside of the stuff, everything else was do it yourself. You need somebody to help you on this, but this is the cheapest thing to do. There's public classes where you can go at the state and local level, but you got to start putting in end user security training. Software, hardware, it's always going to be a vulnerability. The software that's sitting out here, y'all are the vulnerability too, but you can at least train. There needs to be some type of online or classroom-based training on what to do, how to identify what's safe internet habits, what's safe phone habits. A lot of times they've gotten to the point where they're talking to them about how you interact with people on Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, in your official capacity and in your personal capacity. We're going through the USB trick. But what it does is, if you've got a centralized training that you're doing that you can monitor, you can see how individuals are doing. You can provide help to other people that might need a little bit more help. And at the end of the day, if everybody knows that they're going through this training, it encourages the communication. You're going to be like, did you see that email? what are we supposed to do with that? Are we sure that's right? I guarantee you that the communication opens up because they all know that they're in this together. They know that they're going through this training. They're wanting to get better. They're already scared. You might have shown them this video. They're ready. At the higher level, you got to be prepared to eat your own cooking. Because guess what? Your end users are not the ones that are falling prey to this. It's usually somebody higher up. I mean, the big fish is where it's at. So you've got to be ready to know that you're going to be the weakest. And you're going to need to know that you need to get better. Practice responses, that's where all those policies I was talking about, the strategy and the business plan, continuity plan, you need to go through it. This is what we do. That way when I ask this question, everyone's going to be like, yeah, I know, we went through this plan. Go to the conference table, bring in breakfast on it, and just go through it. Talk through it with them. This is what we do, this is our policy, and really go through that. And you really have to communicate to everybody that this is learning. It is not punishment. This stuff happens. It's going to happen. It's inevitable that it's going to happen to somebody in this room. And you can't punish. It's typically not their fault. And you got to take that fear away. It's very hard, but it's got to be communicated from the top down. This is one thing that also it's some money spent, and most internal IT guys don't like it, but I usually say that you do this in addition to your IT guy. So it's an extra spend. But I think that from a cybersecurity risk aspect, you're going to have to start looking at the use of more and more third party specialty providers, hosting providers, managed service providers. Those are guys that'll do everything like manage your backups, manage new users. They'll do the gambit. They'll handle your network, everything. Managed security service providers. Those are the guys that sit out there and watch for anything weird in your event logs. Those guys are exciting at the heart. It's like doing an upside down puzzle. Just sitting there looking at a blank screen just for one little flip. But those guys are fantastic because typically once they see something that's out of the norm, there's a response time. I don't know of very many MSSPs that are not a 24/7, 365 shop. But at the same time, they're not all. None of these guys are going to completely prevent it. They're just giving you that security, that comfort, additional level of risk mitigation. Software as a service. I know FBS currently it requires a local installation on either a PC or a local server. Terminal server. Yeah. So a lot of times I'm seeing more and more people get rid of that and they're moving it. They're using applications that are 100% internet based. And usually there's some type of level of security underneath that where they're using multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. But, again, huge risk in there, but it's something to consider.
So, you heard our Austin yesterday discussion. So, in today's world, I know it's issue is safety,
It depends on what you consider safer. What's your definition of safer? Is it safer than? Well, I think from an ease and a cost perspective, it's safer. And I mean that in that you're not having to have the specialist on site to manage the hardware and the software.
So you got one specialist managing cloud side, not one.
Well, for software as a service, you're actually using the provider that's in charge of all that infrastructure, making sure that the platform's being updated, everything like that. You're just logging in. You're right. Yeah, you're a farmer. you're not you're not an administrator over an application that's sitting in your back room.
So the quicker you get to the cloud, the more secure you might be.
Don't want to say that because there's its own risk in the cloud and everything like that. But it's something you should consider. I mean, it does it outweigh what you currently got?
But if you're having Amazon or Azure or some, they're going to handle all the administrative and the security issues.
What you can do is a lot of times you'll go to sort of an infrastructure hosting provider and they'll have an agreement already with Azure or with Amazon or something like that. And because even though that it's sitting out there in the cloud or whatever, they still have to have firewalls and stuff like that. Even though it's never something physical, these virtual spaces still have to have all those same network security protocols put into it. You're not going to be. I mean, there's only a few things like. You can sign up for the Amazon. Amazon has a FedRAMP. And, I mean, you can't even do anything in that without setting off a bunch of bells and
So
whistles.
you talked maybe a little bit earlier, maybe access to talent, getting people on site. That's one of the risks you're weighing. Okay, we may not get quality on site that we want, or maybe just cost people. I'm big enough to have $250,000 sitting on site, so we're offering that. And that may be, that's kind of a risk in a way.
Yeah.
You're a big enough operation, maybe it's for
Correct. I mean,
what you're going through is.
and the other side of it is you're having to change your focus on this because most of this stuff. I mean, the managed service provider and the MSSP, they could be managing your existing infrastructure, but you've still got a capital burn on this infrastructure that you've got. You're going to have to replace it eventually. With some of these other guys, the infrastructure hosting, software as a service, and some of the security platforms, that's their thing. That's just built into the cost. And real quick, if anybody wants to take a picture of this, cyber insurance policies, they're not
This
as
will be on the web,
expensive.
too.
Huh?
We'll post this on our
Okay.
website.
Yeah, not as expensive as you think, but there's a lot of crappy policies out there. It needs to be different. It needs to address stuff like ransomware, virus, data breaches, and it needs to make sure that it includes the use of a specialist and the payment to a specialist. Okay, and now when I say specialist, I'm talking about lawyers, PR firms, and forensic inspectors.
Security software.
What about it?
Well, do you need it? Is Windows Defender adequate, or
You know-
is there some that
Windows Defender was actually rated #1, I think, in the most recent Gartner survey, like the most trusted one, the most effective one. I mean, Windows Defender has actually become very good, but it depends on the number of endpoints. I'm going to use the term endpoint because an endpoint can be your laptop, your cell phone. It depends on what you're monitoring. If you're only monitoring sort of an Office 365 or a Windows environment, Defender's great. It really is. I mean, it's built in. But there's a lot of really good stuff. I stay away from the Kaspersky's, because it's based out of Moscow and stuff like that. You got to really do your due diligence when you're coming through this stuff.
Any other questions?
What about backup systems?
And
Windows-based backup training is better than another.
it depends on the media that's getting backed up. So if you're doing if you got a server with multiple virtualized environments and you're just replicating, there's best in class stuff. One's not necessarily better than the other. A lot of times you have to be focused on the features and the licensing costs and the storage costs, because eventually some of these things, they use more space when they're indexing stuff. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of the VMware Veeam product on replication, just because, and I really like Data too. It's pretty good stuff, but I don't endorse one or the other. over the other one. It just really depends on your needs. I mean, I've still got people that are using tape backups. I mean, especially some banks with some AS400s and stuff like that. I mean, you see it all over the place. But, off-your-shelf backup software is usually not great. Not a huge fan of the online backup stuff, especially if you're doing enterprise-grade stuff. So you got to really be careful. And with anybody that you're using, if you decide to outsource it or you do it yourself or you get somebody to help you, you got to make sure you're evaluating who's doing it for you. Ask them if, y'all get audited. Do y'all have any type of assurance that you can provide me that this is good? What's your SLA, your service level agreement response times? I know I didn't answer your question because I don't want to give bad advice, but I'm still waiting on the check cashing data.
All right, thank you very much, Jeff.
Yeah,
Very
thank you.
interesting.
Have fun.
And you'll be around.
Man, I'm here until I fly out at 5.
All right, so you could pump him for
Yeah.
information, and you get an email from Jeff. Make sure it is from Jeff.